Kevin, the vacation is over. The president has had an eventful 2 weeks on vacation. He returns to Washington to deliver this speech. What indications do we have of what the president might say tonight?
That was a vacation. Morning, David. Look, this is the president's first primetime address. He will be speaking at about 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern from Fort Myer, just across the Potomac River in Virginia, where he will be giving a decision on just a military strategy. But look, the political context here cannot be understated. This comes at a time when the president's approval rating is hovering in the mid-30s. This also comes at a time following a very controversial, putting it mildly, week last week, as well as several weeks investigations into his Russia meddling. It's going to be really fascinating to see what type of tone the president strikes tonight when he speaks to the nation. Also because the architect behind much of his tone for the inauguration speeches, as well as that joint address to Congress several months ago, Steve Bannon is now out of the White House.
Yeah, let me ask you a bit about that. I'm bringing up my morning must-read here from David Remnick, who's the editor of The New Yorker. He writes in the opening comments of that magazine this week, quote, "Last Friday, in the wake of Charlottesville, Trump finally pushed Steve Bannon out. He's headed back to Breitbart News, but he was staff. His departure was hardly decisive. The culture of this White House was and remains Trump's." How much of this culture, how much of the White House culture so far, in your estimation, Kevin, from your reporting, was shaped or governed by Steve Bannon?
I agree with that, with the morning must read, because I think, look, it's like any company, like any business, it's top down. And the CEO of this company is President Trump. You know, Steve Bannon was brought in to represent a certain faction of the conservative movement. Reince Priebus was also brought in to represent a certain faction, the opposite faction of the movement. And from the sources that I spoke with, they gathered that the president ultimately arrived at the decision that both Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon had, served the White House to the best of their ability, but it was time to move on simply because they were unable to accomplish some of the goals that the president had set out. That said, and then there was one. Vice President Mike Pence is right now the only remaining original senior staff official at this White House.
All right. Kevin, how does the president refocus today? So he's giving a big policy speech. What kind of tone does he need to strike?
Well, hey, Francie, this is not just this is military. And I think that the American people, not the base of the Republican Party, not his supporters, not the 34 to high 30% of Republicans who are without question still with him, but the rest of the country, I think tonight is looking for a president who is going to be speaking as a competent commander-in-chief. And there are several questions have emerged within just the past several days from his own party, including people like Senator Tim Scott, a Republican from South Carolina, as well as Senator Bob Corker, a Republican from Tennessee, who have really raised significant questions about the moral makeup of this commander-in-chief. The president needs to absolutely silence all criticism tonight when he speaks for the first time in his first primetime address to the nation. We haven't seen him use this tool at all. The television medium, we've seen him much more comfortable on Twitter.